Hi everyone, Cindy Bernal from Epic Pueblo. Thank you for coming and joining our presentation today. I'm going to talk a little bit about learning to talk, language, literacy, and learning. Let me tell you just a little bit about Epic Pueblo and who I am. I am as I said, Cindy Bernal, the Community Outreach Coordinator for Epic Pueblo. So I have the pleasure of developing presentations and trainings that we use throughout the community with a variety of audiences. And Epic Pueblo is a group of business leaders, educators, community folks that have a passion and a belief that brain development and early literacy is so critical to our young children and our families. And we want to make sure that they are supported and that children can grow and feel successful as they move through their educational journey through life. So, as I said, we are a group of folks that really have a passion for this. Our board is made up of large and small businesses in the community, government agencies such as the health department, who is helping to sponsor this training for you today. And so, as well as some other non-typical partners, I guess. As I said, government agencies, well, health department's part of the government too. The DA's office, they are very supportive of what we've done and have had me out in training for a whole afternoon for their staff, as well as different early childhood programs. Head Start has us out regularly to train their parents as well as their staff, and Rocky Mountain SARE sponsors a monthly training for us. So we really try to get out here in the community to do what we do and share our information. We do not charge for any of our trainings. Everything we do, we try to keep no cost to the participants because we feel that the information is just so valuable. We don't want money to be a deterrent from someone getting the information that they need. The other big thing we do, besides our educational component, which is critical, that goes hand in hand with that, is we do deliver and donate brand new books to children in the community. And we try to donate those books into different organizations throughout the communities. We don't want any child to grow up not having a book of their own. I know sometimes we kind of live in our own little corner of our community and we think, what we have, every family has, and that's not necessarily the case. So we want to make sure that all families have the opportunity to have their child have their very own book that they get to keep, not when they check out at the library and have to return, although the library is a great resource for families for a variety of supports and services that they provide, and they are one of our strong partners. But we want to make sure that children have a book that they can call their very own. So we give those book donations. There is a process. You have to go online to our website, read the short policy. If you agree with it, then you need to fill out the short form, hit submit. The form goes to a committee made up of board members, myself, and community members, and then we look at the request and decide how many books we can afford to donate and provide to that agency. And we know that children walk through different doors throughout the community to receive whatever services or needs that they need met. So we try to make sure that we're looking at all requests with an open mind to make sure that we're reaching children in ways that we thought we never could. So that's kind of who we are and what we do in a nutshell. So today we're going to talk really about that early literacy piece that we feel so strongly about, and talking, language, literacy, learning, all together. It's all one piece, it's all one component, it's all one piece with different components. Okay, so what is the purpose of language, literacy, and culture? Culture plays into all of that. And so we want to make sure that we're very aware of that language and early literacy development for young children. Language and literacy are two different things. Language is learning to talk. It's learning to communicate. It's delivering a message. Literacy is that reading part, that educational part with books and looking at them and gaining knowledge from that material that is printed. So, and culture, that's who we are. Culture is very broad. A lot of people think that our ethnicity is our culture, and ethnicity is one part of our culture. There are so many pieces that make up who we are as a person with our culture. I have many pieces and components to my culture. I'm Hispanic, I'm female, I'm an educator, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, and a friend. Those all make up my culture. So our culture is very diverse, and we want to make sure that we honor and respect that for each and every child and adult that we work with and share our information. So culture is one of those components that is so critical for us to be aware of and to pay attention to. So that language part, children learn to speak by what they hear. So not all children hear the same language. Some folks in their home speak a different language than we, whatever our primary language may be. Maybe for us, it's English. Maybe some other family, it's Spanish, or it's German, or it's Italian, or it's sign language. There are all kinds of ways children learn to communicate. Whatever that language is in the home, we want to support that, and we want to make sure that children can honor that. And we all want to make sure that when a child goes into another program, a family child care home, another early childhood classroom, an upper level classroom, whatever, that their culture is respected and honored, and that they're not expected to put their culture aside and learn our culture. That's not okay. That's disrespectful, and it's not right. And so that's never anything that we would condone or want you to condone, because our culture is very unique to each one of us. We want to always honor and respect other people's culture. And we may not understand their culture, but we want to respect them for having that culture that makes up who they are. So reading and writing and all of that is part of that literacy component. So beginning at birth, children really start to communicate. And they don't just communicate because they hear language spoke from parents and caregivers or people that interact with them, but they feel things that happen in their environment, and that's all part of communication. And so that's how they learn to respond, because when we all know when babies are first born, they can't talk like we can talk. They speak in a very different language, and they babble a lot, and they gurgle a lot, and they laugh a lot, and they cry. That's all communication. That's all part of what they need to be doing. And so we need to learn to understand their communication and what it is they're trying to tell us. So pay attention to those signs that those little people really give us, because they don't have the life experiences and the language to express themselves. So sometimes it's a guessing game for us as adults. We need to try to figure it out and know what's happening with them and what is it that they need, or what is it they're trying to tell us. Are they happy about, that we're playing with them and talking to them? Or are they, sad because they're hungry and they think nobody's going to feed them, and mom hasn't figured out that I'm crying because I'm starving? Those kinds of things happen with babies. And so we need to learn to read their language and know what it is and read their cues. And we want them to be really happy, and we want them to feel safe in their environment from the time they're born as they grow older. We never want a child to feel that they're not safe where they're at. Because if they're not safe, then we as adults have a responsibility to correct that and to make sure that they're safe. And sometimes, that's a hard thing to do. And life isn't always easy. But how do we support kids so that they come out of those situations in a positive way? So language, literacy, and culture, those researchers have looked at that and said, this really needs to be a strong component in our programs where children go for services, whether it be education, or whether it be an after-school activity, or whether it be a religious activity, or whatever door those kids walk through. We need to make sure that language, literacy, and culture are key, that whoever's providing that program, those services, are sensitive to all of that. And so when you're looking for a new program for your child to go to, whatever kind of program it is, talk to the people that are running that program. And if you don't feel that they are really concerned about your culture, your language, about early literacy, brain development, whatever, find a program that you feel comfortable with, because it has to meet your needs as well, the needs of your child. So what is language? Language can be defined as human speech, as I said, that communication, that interaction, talking to one another, getting our point across. And we don't always have the verbal words to say it. Babies can't talk. People that are mute can't talk. People that are deaf can talk sometimes, but their language may be different from what we're used to hearing. So we want to be respectful of all of those ways of communication, and how does this person communicate, and I need to learn to communicate with them where they're at and do the best I can. And if I can't learn, at least be respectful that they have some uniqueness about them that makes them special. Doesn't make them undifferent or less than. It just makes them special and makes them unique. And we all have things about us that are very special and unique to us. So we want to make sure that we're paying attention. So that's that language part. That literacy part is really that read and write ability that we all need to function in life as we go through life. So reading, even though, parents tell me sometimes, well, she's only 2, she can't read, so what's the point? Why should I, I'll just give her a picture book. Well, giving her a picture book is great because the child will learn to read the pictures and tell you what's going on. But if you just give a child a book and you don't sit and communicate with them, you're leaving out that language part. They're not hearing the language, they're not learning the language. So you want to make sure that you're there teaching them so that they gain that literacy part. And then as they get older, then they start to learn, not only can I see that the printed word is on the page and I may not be able to read it, but one day I will, but somebody had to write it. How do you learn to write? Literacy, writing. So we want to make sure that all of that is something that children are aware of in their environment, that things are actually happening so that they feel like they're comfortable in the world of education when they get there, because education is built on language and literacy. And so we want to make sure we give our children a strong foundation in that language and literacy, child growth and development component as they're growing and going forward. So we want to help them do that. And we want them to understand that when they're doing that with us, we have a way of doing it with them based on our relationship with the child. When they're doing it with an educator, such as a teacher in a classroom, that relationship may be somewhat different because that teacher has got 15 or 20 other children in the classroom. So it may look a little bit different. It may not be a one-on-one. It may be more of a group type of learning and of language and literacy. And so how do we help children to adapt to that? And so what we do, because some children need to know what's going to happen next because they don't do well with change right away. Some kids can adapt quickly. Some kids not so much. Some kids, when I was a child, I had to think about what was going to happen next and know what to expect, and then I was okay. But if things just kind of popped up on me, it left me at a discomfort stage because I wasn't sure how I fit into what was happening because there was no preparation time. So remember that some kids just don't adapt to that so easily. So we want to make sure all of our kiddos are doing that, very much so. So what is early literacy? It's an experience with books. Read to your children. Read to them from the minute that you know you're pregnant, because that builds that. They can hear in utero, especially as they start to develop more, they can hear, but they can feel more than they can hear or see or any of that, but they can feel that togetherness. They can feel the importance of you're sitting there reading to the child, whether that be the mom or the dad or another family member. It's all okay. It's all good. We should all be doing that. So start early with those experiences, reading to your kids and getting them used to it. And as you know, after they're born and whatever, there are books for very young children that can't tear, that they can chew on till their heart's content and they're not going to destroy it. Make sure they have it, because that's part of learning and growing and developing. Because they're chewing on it, and wrinkling it up and whatever, doesn't mean that they aren't, shouldn't be given books and that they're not learning. They're starting to get the respect of books and the experience of touching and handling and knowing what they're for. And then you start to show them and teach them that there's words or there's pictures on the page that you talk about and what happened here and what do you think might happen next and what would you do different. That communication again, that language. So start that as early as possible. And it doesn't take long. Do it. We belong to a 15-minute campaign, a national campaign. We are partners with them, and they have done a lot of research, and it's a website that parents can go to, and there's lots of free information for parents. There's lots of things you can download, posters and games and things, and their research has shown that if every child is read to within 15 minutes a day, that's 24 hours. 15 minutes, not a long time. By the time they get ready to go to kindergarten, their vocabulary will be 3,000 words or more. A child that has not had that experience growing up, maybe 1,200 words, barely able to communicate very little. That's not what we want. We want our children in Pueblo County to have that 3,000 above words. When a child starts with a small vocabulary like that at kindergarten, they spend their entire educational life trying to catch up, because they started so far behind. So let's give our kids all that opportunity so they start up here with the same level with many of those children, and all our children are here on this level ready to go forward and learn. So 15-minute campaign, Read 15 Minutes is the name of the website. Please get on it, check it out. It's all free. It's a great website for parents, for educators, whomever interested, community and family members that want to learn or share information with their kids. And it's fun. So the kids enjoy it. There's things you can do as a parent. There's things you can do with your child on it. So please get on there and check it out, because it's really great. And then we want to make sure that kids are ready when they get to school and they get to kindergarten. They start learning that the words on the page have letters, and the letters have sounds, and you put all that together and they make words, and then you put the words together and they make a story. They make a sentence and then they make a story. Help them do that since they're real little, so when they get to it in formal education in kindergarten and above, they're ready for that process. They're ready to put all that together to make some sense, to be readers. I have a family of readers. My kids, my grandkids, my great-grandkids. When my grandkids were growing up, they tell me, said, okay, Nana, we do have more books in our library at home than the Pueblo Library has, because you give us books for every holiday. And I do, because I think that's how important it is. They always got another gift or two or three or four as well, but they always got books, because books are so important, and they love books. And as adults, my grandkids are readers. They love to read. Their children love to read. And so that's what we want to see. We want to see a community of readers, because as you learn to read, you can communicate and you can be successful in life. And that's one of those components to being successful as an adult, is being able to read and write. So support your children in that effort. And as I said, go ahead and do whatever it takes to support that with your children, but do that reading. Even if you don't get on the website, do that reading for at least 15 minutes a day. And those little people, those little infants and toddlers, they can't sit still for 15 minutes. Doesn't have to be 15 minutes consecutively. It can be 5 minutes here, a couple of minutes here, but try to get those 15 minutes in within their waking hours of every day. And it not only is great for their language and early literacy development, but it's great bonding time for mom and dad to spend that quality time with their kiddos. They love it and they look forward to it. So take that time for yourself and for your kids as well. So how does that early literacy relate to language development? Well, it gives us the language and the words to use to express ourselves, to get our needs met, to explore our world. So we want to make sure that we're providing that for children. And we want them to be able to understand when other people speak to them and have a language, and know that there are different languages, different ways of talking and communicating, because we don't all speak English. And our world, our lives, our communities are becoming more diverse every day. A few years back, I was talking to a friend that lives in Denver, an educator, and we were talking, and she was kind of nervous, because she said, Cindy, do you know that in Denver County, just within the county itself, not all those suburbs, we have over 200 dialects spoken in our community. And she said, and that means children are coming to our programs with a language that English is not their primary language, if they even know any English at all. And she said, and that kind of makes me nervous. How am I going to communicate with those people? That's a struggle. that is something that you have to learn to adapt to. And so you have to learn to speak the body language. You have to show them kindness. You have to help them understand, and they can teach you a few words. You can teach them a few words. So it's really about that communication piece, regardless of what the language is spoken. If you have that communication piece, you can get over that language barrier with time and effort. If you don't, then you struggle. You struggle as well as the person speaking a different language struggles. So you need to be able to kind of know and be aware that not everybody speaks our language, whatever that our primary language may be. So use your language to talk to your kids. Use more words as they get older to explain things. We might say something very simple and basic to a toddler. But when you're talking to maybe a 4 or 5-year-old, you can get in a little bit more detail and give it, maybe it has a different name. When you're talking to a baby and they want, a toddler and they want their bottle, they might call it a baba, or, or their pacifier might be a binky or something like that. But then as they get older, you can explain to them, this is called a bottle. This is called a pacifier. Explain the language development as they go so they know that there are different names for the same thing, just depending on where you're at the time in your age and your development. So use that language to talk to them. Help them learn language to express what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what's going on in their life, to talk to you about it. So that way they have the words to explain it. Because children don't come born with all those life experiences to be able to explain things to us. They have to learn them. We all had to learn them. And so it takes life and it takes experiences, and sometimes it takes those caring adults to help us put words to those feelings and those experiences. So be that person for your child, because you would rather it be you than, the neighbor or someone else that you don't know their life experiences. So they might explain something totally different, and it may not be the same as what you're wanting your child to do. It may not be that they're trying to harm them or teach them, weird things. It just means that their experiences are different. So you be the parent, you be the guardian, you be that caring, loving person in that child's life that helps them learn those experiences from your perspective. And then as they grow older, they will put their own perspective on it, and that's okay. That's what we want them to be, individual, critical thinkers for themselves. So we want to connect all of that together. And as they grow and they look at those books, and that's that early literacy piece, and they like to read the pictures and talk to you and have you read the same story over and over and over again, then they start, as they get a little bit older, they start to realize the printed words on the page mean something. And so then they realize that the letters have sounds. The sounds make words. The words make sentences. Sentences make a story. So help them in that progression as they're learning their language and early literacy, and how it grows and develops with them, because they need you to help them and guide them, because that's one of those things in life that we all learn. But sometimes it can be fun if they have the support. Sometimes it's a struggle if they get to school and all of a sudden the teacher expects them to be at this level and they're not there yet because they didn't have that experience. So make sure our kids all have that experience. So awareness of where language development begins. It begins from in utero, really. Babies, they can hear you, they can feel you. All of that starts that growing. All of that starts that brain development. And brain development, for those of you that may not be aware or just need a reminder, 90% of our brains develop between the age of 1 and 5. Think about that for a second. 90%. That's amazing. That's just almost overwhelming when you think about it, that our brains developed so much in those first 5 years of our life. And so what does that mean? That means we need to support those babies. We need to support everything they do in a positive way so that their brains are developing in a positive manner. And so I have a brochure here that we use, and this brochure really shows a lot about that brain development for those that need to have kind of that picture of it. It's easier to explain and understand. If you look at this brain scan on the outside of the brochure, it's got a lot of dark matter. This is a brain of a 5-year-old that has not been nurtured. has not had that communication, that interaction, that early literacy piece, that language development with anyone in their lives. So their brain cells, their synapses and neurons have not made the connections to make brain cells. So it's not developed fully. Then you open this up, and this is a normal child, 5 years old, who has had that support, that nurturing. And you can see there's not so much dark matter. Those brain cells are developing. They're working. They're there. And they will continue as they get older. So as you can see, it says this is the stimulated brain. This is the non-stimulated brain. And then on the back, it shows different ways we can stimulate brain development for young children. We can talk to them. We can touch them in a positive manner. We can read to them. We can play with them. All of those activities develop that child's brain. So pay attention to that for our kids. We want to make sure that we're giving them that every single day that will support language and brain development. So there are 7 stages of communication and language development, and the first one happens from birth to 3 months. And that baby is learning to communicate through their reflexes, and they're moving their body, and they're crying when they are hungry, or they need a diaper change, or whatever. Their body is their communication tool at that stage in their life. Then they move from 3 to 8 months, and then they start to become more aware of people and activities and needs that they have. And so they start to communicate more intentionally. And so they might start, pointing to the kitchen if they're hungry, or the refrigerator if they think there are bottles in there. So they become more intentional about how they communicate. So then they move from that 8 to 13 months, and they very intentionally become sociable. They start to talk to others, and they talk in their own language sometimes. They don't have the words at that point most of the time. They may have a few sounds and put things together that make sense, and sometimes a lot they'll put together doesn't make sense to us. But we need to figure out what it is they're trying to communicate. So that's that 8 to 13 months. And then the 12 to 24 months, they really start to figure out language as a code, and how does that work? And okay, I've heard, mom called this guy over here dad, and so they start to figure out how to say dad or dada, if we taught them dada or mama or whatever, and they start to put all of that together. And that really is really interesting if you watch it, because it's really their mind that is working, their brain that is developing and working and trying to put language together to learn to talk, which is an incredible thing as we do as human beings. So 18 to 24 months, they can use 2-word sentences. Go by. They want to go somewhere, They put 2-word sentences together to start to communicate what it is their need is at the moment, what they're trying to tell you, what they're trying to say, what they're wanting. So pay attention to that, because then they go from that 24 to 36 months, and they actually can put 4-word sentences together, 5-word sentences, and they put things together. Go outside, play. There's almost a sentence for them, and that that's what they want to do. So pay attention as they start, and then encourage them to use their words and use their language, because if they're not encouraged, pretty soon that's where you get those littles that just, they cry and point for everything, or they yell and scream and point for everything, because we haven't taught them to use their language and they don't know any other way. So that's on us. If we have a child that's the only way they know to communicate, that means that we haven't done our job to help them, give them a language to communicate to us and for their needs. So then that 3 to 5 years, the child uses long, complex sentences and can actually carry on a conversation. It may be a silly, conversation, a 3-year-old has, because they don't have the comprehension yet and they don't have life experiences to really explain things, but they can actually put together a conversation and talk to you and tell you things. So encourage that. And if they can't find a word, help them find the word that maybe you might think. Are you thinking about maybe having, something special they like, macaroni and cheese for dinner, but they don't know that that's what it's called. They just call it cheese, So say macaroni and cheese. Give them the language so that way they start to develop that. And they may not be able to speak it and understand it right away, but then they hear it enough, pretty soon it just becomes part of their vocabulary. And then as they get older, 5 years and up, they certainly can put together conversations for most of our children. And you have to remember that these stages are based on typical development, whatever typical development is by the researchers, because we all develop at our own rate and growth. And so not every child is at this specific stage at exactly those months. So remember that we all develop differently. And so especially if it's a child that was born premature or has some special needs, that child's language may be a little bit delayed from this chart here. So this is not meant to be, if your child's not doing it, then you need to figure out what's going on. That's not the case. That it's just kind of a guide, a general guide to follow. But be aware that all children grow and develop at their own speed. And if the child has special needs, that will play a role into how they learn their language development as well. And their language may be very different from this total stage pattern that the researchers have laid out for us. So always be aware of that everybody's special and unique in their own way. Doesn't make them different, doesn't make them not smart, doesn't make them, dumb. It makes them unique. It makes them very special to who they are. So we want to respect that for all of our children. Speech development from infancy to toddler and so on. We want to be aware of how our kids are talking. So when we talk to them, we want to make sure the language we want them to hear and that we're very clear how we articulate the words, so that they can learn to articulate them as they've heard and that as we are teaching. Because they're going to hear those same words in the larger community when they get out there, whether it be playing with the neighbor next door, or whether it be in the school setting, or it be in church, or wherever they're at, they're going to hear a lot of those words. And so you want them to be able to articulate those words the best way they can. And if they have a speech impediment, that may look a little bit different. Again, we want to be respectful of all children at all levels, at all development, and all of their specialness that each child has. So, milestones in speech development. There are certain milestones that we kind of reach with children. That 7 days of age, a child can distinguish and hear their mother's voice and recognize when she talks to him that's mom. If another female comes in and talks to him, he may not be so responsive because that's not mom's voice. They can determine the sound of that voice because that's the voice that's been there constant to take care of them. Now that 2 weeks of age, they can usually then start to discern dad's voice. It's different from mom's. And so, because dads typically are off working, and when the babies are new, moms usually get to stay home with them, not always. And then sometimes fathers have nowadays, have family-friendly practices in a lot of businesses, so fathers fortunately are able to take time off to be with that baby too. So some of these milestones may change, but these milestones were developed when the mother was the one that would stay home with the baby primarily. So just know that that's different in this day and age at times, but not for all families. So just kind of look at it and figure out where you fit in for your family, because we're all different and unique. And then at 3 months, that baby can learn to kind of start to make vowel sound like, oh, oh is always an easy one because they can see your voice when you're saying, oh, look at you. That oh, but your mouth makes that oh motion. They can see that. They can learn from that. Then at 6 to 8 months, they can add a few consonant sounds to the vowel sounds, and they can say something like dada or mama, or baba for a bottle, or whatever they're hearing in their environment. And then at a year, they can attach and know that mama goes to her, dada is him, and they can start making those relationships and those comparisons and know that this, he's not mama, she's mama. She's not dada, he's dada. So they start to figure all of that out. And so watching them is really interesting to me as an early childhood professional, because it's just amazing how they grow and develop so quickly. And so then at 15 months, the infant continues to put vowels together and components, consonant sounds together, and sometimes some people call it gibberish or baby-ese. They call it baby-ese sometimes, that baby language. And so they might be talking, and they can say some words and some sounds, but then they put in a little bit of baby gabbling and babbling, and then they put in a word. And so it's because they don't have the language to fill in those places, so they use the only language they now know, and that's baby language, whatever you call it, gibberish, baby-ese, or babbling, or whatever. They put all of that together, but that's all part of language development as they're growing and learning and listening. And then there's that 18 months that they can actually say nouns like ball, cup, Joey. If there's a brother or a friend or somebody that's there in their life that's named Joey, and they hear that, they can start to put a name with a person. At that age, they kind of start to figure things out, and they can make their needs a little bit more known, so that we understand what it is they're asking for and what they want. And then at 2 years of age, the child can combine words from forming single sentences that, like daddy go or daddy bye, daddy's gone, he's leaving, but he can't say daddy went to work. He may just say daddy go, because to him, he's figured that much out. So they're starting to figure things out and move forward. And it really is about progression. They start very simply with just that body language kind of thing at very young infants, and then they start to progress at each of these different milestone ages. And then at 3 years, they can really use sentences, 4 words long, and they can follow simple directions when you ask them to do something. But when you give young child directions, don't give them too many directions at once, because they don't have the capacity at that age to be able to follow things. So if you want them to pick up their toys, tell them you go to the toy room, and then when they're there, explain to them, we're going to pick up toys, and then say, please help me. So that way they have these directions that get them to the task that you're trying to get them to, but that they can comprehend and understand. Because if you're just standing in the kitchen saying, go to the toy room, pick up the toys and put them away, and they're like, that was way overload. They can't do that. Not at that age. So help them, give them directions, because then they get frustrated, and then you get frustrated because you want them to perform a task. You're busy, you have things to do, and so it takes time and patience to be able to give them directions so that they are successful, because they don't have the capacity to put, too many directions together to get to the outcome. So then by the time they're 4, they really do start to understand a lot of the communication that's going on around them, or at least they can hear it and understand some of the words, but some of the words that we use may not be in their vocabulary yet, so they're like, I don't know what that means. So then they start to ask questions, and they start to try to figure out what's going on. And then sometimes, they get very insistent with parents or caregivers, this is what I want, I need, I just don't know how to tell you. And so they start to point, or they start to act out, or whatever. So they use different ways of communicating. So give them a break and know that they can start to learn very many things. And from 4 years on, they can start to learn, that they know that they're a boy or a girl, that they have a name, they're 3 years old, 4 years old, whatever. And they can start to communicate in a way that not only you, but others around them can understand. So pay attention to those milestones. But remember that we all grow and develop at our own rate, and we're all special and unique in our development. And so we want to make sure that we're not holding kids to this milestone ages. If they're not there, they could be, a little bit slower in reaching them, or they could be way beyond. And so it doesn't mean that it's not right. It just means that they're unique and they're special in who they are. And so give them that respect and help them move from one level to the other. And that doesn't mean, okay, well, you've said this now for a while, so now it's time to start putting two words together. That doesn't work, because kids just, they don't develop on command. We develop on our own specifics within us and our own experiences and the support that we've received. So just remember that this is just kind of a general guideline. And culture differences in languages certainly is different, because it brings in that cultural piece of who we are. And culture is not just our ethnicity. Ethnicity is one part of our culture. There are so many other things that make it up. For me, my culture, my ethnicity is Hispanic. I am a female. I'm an educator. All those different things. I'm a grandmother. I'm a mother. I'm a great-grandmother. All of those things make up my culture. I have certain beliefs that are faith-based, that might be my political beliefs, my business beliefs, my educational beliefs. All of those make up our culture. So always remember that. And so when we're talking with people, we need to be respectful of their culture. We may not understand it because we're not familiar with it, but we need to respect it and know that, and hope that they would respect our culture as well. So as I said, my friend in Denver has all those different languages. That's certainly a cultural shock for her as an educator, as well as for those families and children that are coming into programs that are entering into a different culture that they're not used to. So all of that takes learning. All of that takes patience, respect, and understanding. And so don't beat yourself up if you don't understand someone's culture. All you have to do is respect that they have that culture. Doesn't mean that you have to understand it or believe it, because we all have our own, and that's how it should be. But that's what makes the world go round, is all of our differences and our diversity. So, excuse me. So we want to make sure that we're paying attention to how diverse our world is, how diverse the world is for our children. In all the environments they go into, it's different, and that diversity changes. And so how do we help them navigate that? And the best way is the same way we navigate it, by being respectful, by being patient, by trying to learn and to understand, or at a minimum, just respecting that they're a little bit different. They might talk different, they might look different, but that's okay. It just means that they're special. We're all special in our own unique way. So help children gain that understanding, because it's really important, especially if they meet a child that doesn't speak their language, doesn't speak English, or doesn't speak Spanish. And how do we help support that? Patience and understanding and respect. Do that for each and every person you meet, and we would have a world full of peace and joy and understanding and respect of others. Excuse me. So make sure that you're working with the kids in your family, in your classroom, whatever the case may be, and be culturally sensitive to them. Doesn't mean you have to agree with their culture, doesn't mean you have to understand it, doesn't mean you have to acclimate to it. Just be respectful and know that they're unique, and their culture is unique to them, just as your culture is unique to you. And so treat others as we'd like to be treated ourselves, I guess, is basically. Communication, interaction is the key. Make sure we talk to our kids. Make sure we're communicating with them, because if we don't communicate with them when they're little, when they get older, they're not going to come communicate with us, because they've never learned that that's a norm in our family. We have to teach them that no matter what happens or what they're dealing with, they can always come to us, that we will always be there. We may not be happy, we may not agree with it, we may not understand it, but we will help them work through it, and that they can always come to their parent or their guardian, whoever that person is, and that they will be there for them and not judge them and not turn them away because they didn't agree with what ever happened. So if we don't teach them to communicate since they're little, they're not going to start communicating when they're in, middle school or high school. Those are hard years. And if they've never learned to communicate with you, it's not going to happen then, because that's not something that's been a norm in their family. So why should they? But if somebody else, a friend, a gang, whatever, that's why gangs are so successful and recruit so well, because they provide that child didn't get at home. And that's a scary thing, and it's hard because, you know, families are diverse, and it's not that families aren't doing a good job. It's just that families are, you know, they're busy, or circumstances have changed how things happen, and that can happen in a lot of families in a positive or negative manner. And so we need to try to be as intentional as we can with communication with our kids, and it's not always easy, and it does take time and understanding. And so when you're talking to the kids, especially those littles, because their language isn't quite developed yet, you really have to pay attention. You have to tune everything else out, put the phone down, turn the TV off, you know, whatever you're doing, put it aside for just a few minutes to listen to the child, to know what they're trying to communicate, because they will tell you, but you need to pay attention, and you need to give them the time, and that's respectful. And I know when I was in the classroom with kids and I was working with a child, and I'd have a teacher or a parent or somebody coming in and want to talk to me, and I'd always make sure that they, you know, I let them know, I said, you know, I'm happy to talk to you, but right now my attention is right here with Jimmy or whoever the child is. And as soon as I finish with him, I'm glad to hear you, because I can't hear both at the same time, and I want to be respectful, and we're going to finish up with Jimmy, and then we'll talk about what you need to talk to me about. And there's nothing wrong with that, because children deserve the same respect as do adults. Adults should never feel that they can just shove a child aside because their issue is more important than a child's. So give them that. And then role model when you're with a child, you know, and as this slide said, that circle of communication, dance with the child. And it can mean physical dancing, but it can mean also just that back and forth, that interaction, that paying attention. Because when you dance with someone, you know, a dance, you are just focusing on that person and the music or whatever the dance is. Dancing with a child is you're focusing on that situation, whatever it is with that child. Doesn't mean you're actually dancing. It may mean you're just sitting there talking, or you're laying in bed and having a conversation while you're reading a book. Dance with that child. Give them that special time, because dancing is a special time with your child. So get that done. Model what matches or is consistent with the child's current level of communication. So try to figure out, when you're trying to communicate with a child, what is it they're trying to say, and try to give them words to understand and to move forward with that. And then always listen. Listen, 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 and wait till they're finished trying to tell you what they're trying to tell you, because then you can do it better. They know you respect them, and that you're trying to learn with them. And then follow the child's lead, because oftentimes they know what they're trying to say. They don't have the words or the language or the body language to tell you, but they know that they're trying to communicate something to you. So try to help them, you know, and try to give them words so that they can say, yeah, that's what I want, or, you know, because then you are teaching them that communication is critical to get your needs met. It's important, and I'm respecting that you don't have all the words yet to make me understand what you want. And then make sure your expectations for each child are realistic. You know, just because a child is 4 years old and may weigh 70 pounds, because they're a big child, they're a tall child, they're a heavy child, whatever, doesn't mean they're still not 4 years old. Or as development happens in human beings, 4-year-old child is still pulling behaviors from a 3-year-old, and maybe even some 2 behaviors, and they may have some 4-year-old behaviors starting to move in and what they're doing, and then there may be some things that are moving on to the 5-year-old level. So we don't develop at a specific rate. Just because our chronological age says we're 2 doesn't mean everything we do is 2. As I've told my students in college, in classes, when they said, if you don't learn much else this semester, but one of the things I want you to know is that our age is nothing but our chronological age that tells us how long we've been on this earth, tells us our birthdays, that's all. Does not tell us anything about the development of where we're at, whether we're a child or an adult. Doesn't tell us anything. We have expectations for those age groups, but it doesn't tell us whether that person is really in that age group developmentally. So remember that, because that works for kids and adults. And then have fun with the kids. You know, do some activities with them that promotes language and literacy. And so here are some that we've used in class from time to time that are really great with the kids. The kids really like these kinds of things because they can actually manipulate them and do them. So pipe cleaner, finger puppets, story sacks, building block stories, funny flip games, stick puppets, rhyming baskets. They're all simple little things that you can do with materials you have in your home. And that's what the kind of activities when I do trainings like this in a group, in a classroom setting, is I try to have activities because not everybody learns the same way. Some people learn by just watching and listening, and then some people, they need to touch and they need to feel and they need to do. They learn better. So I always try to make sure I'm reaching different learners regardless of how they learn. So that way they're getting the message and the information in the way that feels most comfortable for them. So remember these, and there's lots of them. You can find some online, developmentally appropriate, easy, simple, do-it-yourself games at home or whatever to help children. So our language, culture, literacy, it's all connected, all of it. But it's all critical, and it all happens at different times. And it all happens in a progression, but the progression may happen at different ages for each individual. So remember that, and that's because we're unique. We're individuals, and we have a uniqueness about us that is very critical and very special to our ultimate growth and development. So parents, help maintain first language. Get involved. Involve yourself in your child's activities. Involve yourself in their school setting. Involve yourself with the neighbors or the friends that they go to play with. Be a part of that, so that way you know what's happening in those settings. You feel comfortable. You can kind of guide that information and that play with your child. Teachers, be culturally responsive and give instruction. Don't have unrealistic expectations. Strategies for parents and students. Explicit instructions. All of those are different components that teachers need to be aware of when they're working with children, because they're working with a diverse group of children and families, and they want to be respectful to all of them. So for a teacher, that could mean a teacher with 15 in a classroom or 20. Just think how complex that is to try to figure out each of those individual families and children. And what makes them tick, and how to communicate with them, and what is their culture, and what do they understand. But there's all kinds of things, as you can see. Celebrate that diversity. Celebrate our differences, because it's so important, because we don't all want to look alike. We don't all want to be the exact same person. Our world would be a very sad place. We are special, we are unique, and we need to celebrate that together and with our kids. So, as I said before, here's my contact information. Please feel free to contact me at any time if you have a question. If you would like a training for a group that you're with or whatever, please let us know. We're happy to go out there and do what we can. We're very grateful and thankful to the health department for supporting the videotaping of our presentations to kind of reach a larger population within our community. Thanks again, Cindy Bernal from Epic Pueblo.